A word of warning, this podcast explores graphic and disturbing stories and includes some strong language. It therefore may not be suitable for our young listeners or other folks who may find it disturbing. Hello and welcome to True Crime News, the podcast covering high-profile and under-the-radar cases from across the country every week. I'm your host, Ana Garcia. Our case this week, a forbidden workplace romance in, of all places, the morgue. The prosecutor says the two accused killers who were having an affair were in the business of death, and not just because of the murder. He worked at the coroner's office, and her job was to transport dead bodies. Skills which came in handy, say police, when the two allegedly had a hand in killing her ex, the father of her children. Prosecutors say at one point the dead man's body was stored in a locker at a funeral home until the two accused accomplices could figure out how to dispose of him. We are recording this on Friday, June 13th of 2025. Our guest today is Rachel Fiset, an attorney, a legal analyst, a dear friend of the show, a woman who I value. So Rachel, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me. Always amazing to be on the show.
Always love to hear your thoughts on these cases. You have just a way of cutting through a lot of the noise and asking the very logical questions and pointing out what's missing, where the weaknesses are, and where the strengths are. So can't wait to hear about your thoughts on this case.
Thank you.
Okay. I would say this is one of the messiest murder cases that we've talked about in a while. The two people here who are accused of murder were in the business of handling dead bodies. But when it came to the murder and then the alleged cover-up here, the accused did a lousy job, according to prosecutors. The case is out of Horry County, South Carolina. And the trial in this case has already begun. There's some testimony going on. So we have a lot of updates. It's a case in motion, but a lot has happened already. So Meagan Jackson, who is 40 years old, is accused of killing her ex-boyfriend, Gregory Rice, who was 46 at the time, and the father of her children. He was found wrapped in a tarp, dumped in a river. Now, prosecutors say that Meagan allegedly plotted the murder with her then lover, Christopher Dontell. 41-year-old Christopher, this is a mess. This is like a messy, messy love triangle. 41-year-old Christopher was married at the time and had two small children. And one of the potentially inciting incidents here is that Meagan was allegedly pregnant from this affair. This thing is a mess, Rachel. This is a mess that I can't even unravel. I always say that love triangles end badly. They do. The worst possible scenario is when someone is seriously injured or killed. This case, I can't figure this one out.
It's a difficult case in that we don't have a motive. We don't know exactly why this happened other than what is on the surface of the case, a love triangle, a pregnancy. There's some alleged abuse that we'll hear about, but it's not formulated in a way that she could not have just left her longtime boyfriend, father of her children. So it's difficult to figure out what these two are necessarily thinking. He has now testified as to what he was thinking, what was going on in his mind, if you're to believe his testimony. But this is a pretty clear disaster. And with his testimony against her, it does appear it's going to be hard for her to formulate a viable defense as well.
Yes, he testified yesterday. He's describing how she shot her ex, Gregory. So you have a witness here, an eyewitness who says, I was there. I saw what she did. Yes, indeed, I did help dispose of the body, but I didn't kill him. And we'll get into the details of what he has already agreed to. And he is testifying against his former lover, hoping to get a lighter sentence. He's been clear about that. He's been very, very clear about that. When you hear the details of their relationship, how it started, this whole thing, there are so many victims here. You have, the children who have been left without a father. You have the children of the other one who's accused here, right? He's got 2 children and his wife is horrified at it's just destruction.
It's destruction. And the leading up through the relationship is somewhat interesting, how these 2 families came together and lived close to one another and formed some friendships, and the accused became helpful to her boyfriend's family in bringing them food and that kind of thing. So it's an intertwined mix of people. And the testimony against her by the man who has pled as her co-conspirator, and he's also pled guilty to accessory. So he has admitted his role, obviously, so he was not also charged with murder. But though that testimony is damning, it's very hard to get around when you also think of all of the pieces that were coming into place beforehand. These are certainly not strangers to one another in any way.
Yeah. Small town drama, lots of families devastated here. 1 man dead, another man who clearly is going to go to prison because he's already admitted to his conspiracy. And now you have Meagan, who's waiting to hear her fate, even though she claims innocence, and her attorneys say there's no proof that she killed Gregory. They said very specifically, there's no video, there's no audio. I'm like, yeah, that's on TV. You don't always capture the murder on camera, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of other evidence. At least it appears to be evidence against her based on what's been presented at trial so far. So let's get into this. As we said, this case is currently sitting before a jury. The prosecutor says that the 2 lovers here, so the 2 people accused, they would have sex in the transport vans that they were using to transport dead bodies. Because she had a bunch of kids at home and he had a wife and kids. This is just one of those messy love triangles and affairs. Christopher Dontell was a deputy coroner, and Meagan worked for a company that transported the bodies between, let's say, the morgue, the funeral home, the scene if someone had, let's say, passed in their bed. So they worked together, if you will, in a very dark industry. Now, for the 2 people here who are so expert at handling dead bodies, they made so many mistakes, according to police. Meagan is currently on trial for the murder of her ex, Gregory Rice, who was killed in 2020. Of course, she insists that she's innocent, presumed innocent. Her accused accomplice here, Christopher Dontell, we know there are a lot of people here, so I'm trying to streamline it for you. He made a deal in December, and he pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of accessory after the fact and conspiracy to commit kidnapping, which I find interesting. So he has agreed to testify, which he already did yesterday, against his former love, and he's hoping for a reduction in his sentence. So he hasn't been sentenced yet. Everything is hinging on how well he performs during this trial. And I have a question here, Rachel. If you're a juror and you have someone who's clearly telling you, look, I'm cooperating because and he said this on the stand yesterday, I hope that I'll get some leniency in my sentence. How is that generally perceived? Is that perceived as someone who's got skin in the game and just will say anything, or someone who really knows he better tell the truth because his future depends on it?
Both of those things are true. So juries really have to weigh the credibility of someone who is cooperating and who has pled basically so that they can cooperate and for the purpose of getting a lighter sentence. That is what he is doing, and he had to front that on the stand. Otherwise, the defense would tear him apart with that information. So you do front that information and you still just have to carry on and look credible. And this is a prosecutor's problem all of the time because they have to get these witnesses to get the bigger fish. So in this instance, as the person who pulled the trigger, allegedly, she is the bigger fish and he is the witness. There is no doubt, according to all of this, of his story, he was involved, but he has pled so the prosecutors can use him as a witness. And he is the eyewitness to this, but the jury has to look at that and say, will he say anything? Does this story sound credible? Why would he have pled to these facts if he didn't do them? So there's all kinds of weighing of the evidence that the jury does as it relates to credibility. And it really has to do with how he comes off on the stand.
I thought that he was credible on the stand. And this is just a personal observation, but he also came across as rather pathetic, and here's why. He's describing the first time that Meagan made a move on him. This is from his perspective that they were out at some restaurant or something and she says she needs to talk to him. They hop in her van and then he says that she straddles over to him on top of him and tries to make out with him and make some comment about, have you ever cheated on your wife? Because you're just about to. And that he said that he rebuffed her and she was persistent. Meagan, this is his testimony. This is what I mean. It's like, oh my God, all this drama that's coming out. And she apparently told him, no one has ever rejected me before. And allegedly, she pursued him. He finally gave in. And then they had this full blown affair. But he's sitting there crying, boo-hoo, I finally gave in to her. And it was just like he was this defeated man who, when you think about it, makes a terrible decision. I'm not even going to say it's a mistake. You know what you're doing. Your instinct the first time when you said no to this woman because you are a married man was correct. He finally gives in to the temptation. He has the affair. And before you know it, the affair then, is turning into this disaster of a murder and then the hiding and the cover up of this body. And now this man goes from making out with someone he works with to standing trial originally for murder. And now he's cut himself a deal and he's sitting there and he's crying. And yet, you know what? His life is a freaking mess.
That testimony to me is not incredibly credible. And I think as the prosecutor had to go through this, they had to figure out in some ways, because they're working with him. Trust me, they are working with him and have been prior to the plea to see if he would make a good witness. And this is part of the story that everybody chose to tell. And it's kind of one of those stories, particularly people might go, that doesn't sound quite accurate. You're blaming her for something that you obviously had a hand in doing. But if I had to guess, and we'll cover it shortly, I think he is telling that testimony and the prosecutor is working with him on that exact story, how she's eventually getting her way in this affair, because that exact story with all of its holes is going to come back and he's going to tell kind of that exact story again, but by way of body hiding and murder. And so how he's just succumbing to her wishes and he's very fearful of her. So it's an interesting story to tell, and it is one that absolutely the jury might have to buy into to believe the actual story that matters as it relates to his testimony later and his role in the crime.
Yes, because then he talks about how he starts crying again, that he was afraid. He tells the jury he was afraid after he says he sees her kill her ex. He's afraid that she will then turn around and kill him if he doesn't help her finish off what she started. And so he's crying and saying he was in fear for his life because of what he had just witnessed. His feeling was, my God, if she just turned on the father of her children, what's she going to do to me? Like, I can understand that it's very, if he really didn't know that that day that she was going to go out there and shoot and kill him as she is charged, I suppose it could be very jarring and very scary. It's like, oh my God, what is this? But here's the thing. And we're going to get into this testimony where he went there with Meagan to her ex's complex where the man lives. Can you please explain to me what exactly did you think was going to happen? Why are you there? Why would you go to her ex's? Like, does this make any sense to you?
Right. I agree. So this is where I think he's definitely trying to deflect his role in basically the whole affair and criminal acts thereafter. So it is something the jury has to weigh. They have to think about his credibility in basically completely blaming her for everything.
Exactly. And also for starting the affair. You know what? Own up to it. You better grow a pair and you better own up to it, because this is serious. One man is dead. Children are without a father. You're facing time in prison. You have 2 kids. It's what a freaking mess. Oh, the other thing he said was, and why he lied, because he said that he lied initially to police, which he did. And he said because he was scared. He was trying to save his job, his marriage, his family, to which I would say to this man, why didn't you think of this before?
Right. So if there are married women on this jury, or generally people, they are asking these questions.
Exactly. Yeah. Come on now. Come on. Own up to this. Okay, so let's figure out how we kind of got to this point. Motive's still not very clear, but let's get into the history of the 3 people involved here. So Meagan and Gregory were never married. They dated for many years and they shared 4 children together. While they were together for many years, Meagan has described her relationship as being very toxic. She claimed that Gregory was abusive, even though she apparently never called the police or filed any charges against him. And she claimed that he had some serious addiction problems. Their own 19-year-old daughter described her father on the stand as being a very flawed man. But she also said that he was loving to the children. And, I think that's really something when you have to sit there as a young adult. And she was shaking, this young girl. She was shaking as she was testifying. She was so scared and anxious. That's a hard thing to say, to admit that your parents are lacking, because we always need them and want them to be everything for us, but they're not.
Exactly.
So according to their oldest daughter, Savannah Jackson, the pair, meaning Meagan and Gregory, had separated multiple times. There were claims of infidelity on both sides, and Savannah testified against her own mother in this case. As I said, she was trembling the whole time, trying to hold it together. She told the jury that they fought all the time, that they were very mean to each other, but she made it clear to each other, meaning, Meagan says that he was abusive, but the adult daughter is saying, you know what, they were both abusive toward each other. So clearly a toxic relationship without question. They shared the children, but they primarily lived with the mom, but Gregory would get them on the weekends. And here's what's very interesting, Rachel. There was a very clear pattern that the daughter testified about. And the pattern was that the father always came over on the weekend to pick up the kids, take them and bring them back. Always. He came, picked them up. But on the weekend that he goes missing, mom, Meagan, decides she's going to drive the kids over and drop them off. And she's the one who makes the discovery that dad is missing. And she's the one who ultimately calls police that he is missing.
Right. So this is an essential piece of evidence that the jury has to really think about. Why would she change what is a very historic and steady pattern on this particular weekend? And really, I have to ask, why would she change it? Why wouldn't she just wait for him not to show up look believable and then call the police. But for her to change
point.
But for her to change her pattern and be like, oh, he's not here. What a surprise. We better find him. I don't know. It's like she wanted to cut to the chase. She knew he wouldn't show up. Then they'd have to go see him and go look for him. So she's like, let's just skip step one.
Wow, oh my God, I didn't even see that. That's brilliant. Absolutely. Why didn't she just keep to the regular pattern? Oh my goodness. Look at you, counselor. All right. So that's what's going on with Meagan and the father of her children, Gregory. Now let's talk about Meagan, because she's in the middle of everything, and Christopher. So both in the death services industry, transporting remains to funeral parlors and to coroners' offices. Christopher and Meagan met in 2018, and she was working for a company that handled the body transport. Christopher was leaving that company to become a county deputy coroner, okay? And so Meagan was his replacement, and he helped to train her. So that is how the relationship, the workplace relationship, begins. Okay, so it goes from that to friendship to then affair. And because the two of them, this to me, oh gosh, it's like, this is like a bad drama. Because the two of them could be called out at any hour of the day or night when someone has passed, it was not unusual for them to have hours that are unaccounted for. And it's instead of like with the old affair where you're like, oh, I'm running to the store story, right? Where everyone's like, why are you running to the store at 10 o'clock at night? These two had a cover. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, someone's been found dead and so, right?
That's right. So they made it easy and less detectable by their partners.
Mm-hmm. So, Christopher testifies about this whole thing where, Meagan gets on top of him and he rebuffs her. And then finally, he can't resist her anymore. Now, here's the other thing that's very manipulative. And I really dislike this part of it the most because I feel it goes to the feeling of being really taken and betrayed. So Meagan starts to befriend her lover's wife, right? And starts hanging out with them. She eventually moves to their neighborhood. And she's like a 2-minute walk from their home. And she spends a lot of time there. And then they start having the two families together. And so the kids are starting to blend. But the whole time that she is in, Erica is the name of the wife here, in Erica's home, she's sleeping with Erica's husband. Mm-hmm. It's just like so disgusting.
It is scary. It's one of those scary moments where you feel like you can't trust your friends and neighbors. And Erica was testifying, this was COVID. So we all know, during the pandemic, there would be people that would choose to only hang out with certain others for risk of disease and whatnot. And so through COVID, these two families were that to each other. And that is a lot of closeness, but it's sounding like this gave Meagan Jackson the means to stay close to the person she was having an affair with.
Yeah. Oh, it's a tangled web. So let's get back to Gregory now. So now we know all the moving parts and who's having an affair, where, and what's going on. So Gregory is last seen alive on October 2nd of 2020. And the last person that he allegedly spoke to was Meagan. What a surprise. She said, as we mentioned, she went to drop off the kids. He wasn't there. She's worried. 3 days later, she reports him missing. And police claim that when they interviewed Meagan about Gregory's disappearance, she showed no emotion. Okay. Everybody reacts differently to stress. So, weeks after he is reported missing, on November 8th of 2020, Gregory's body is discovered by a woman who was setting up catfish lines in the Little PD River. The body was wrapped in a tarp, had been secured with zip ties, and Gregory's body was weighed down with a cinder block. According to the medical examiner, it appeared as though Gregory had been shot in the head with a .22 caliber 5 to 7 times. The doctor later told jurors that Gregory's brain was essentially liquefied. So the person who killed him wanted full-on damage here, without question. So of this whole case, to me, the most fascinating is how authorities untangled some of the forensic digital evidence and how that led them to the two lovers. This is always, for me, the interesting part of the investigation. How'd you figure it out? What do you believe the evidence shows? So they use cell phone data, security cameras, and license plate readers basically to piece together Gregory's final moments and how his positioning of his phone intersected with what Meagan and Christopher were doing that night. And the really haunting part of this, Rachel, is Gregory's phone continued to collect data and ping off towers, apparently while he was dead.
This data is available. This is how we solve crimes these days. Location finders and cell phone towers. And this is very valid data. That this is data that is widely used. So the fact that there is basically a location, the ability to kind of, in many ways, yes, it's not exact, but to trace his moments, his transport, if you will, is again, bodes very poorly for her defense.
I agree. I think it's very damaging evidence here. So, police say that the locations on the victim's cell phone got them to locations where there were surveillance or security cameras. So that's when they started looking and matching up and saying, okay, at this time, Gregory was in this area. Let's see what these cameras show. Oh, these cameras show the star-crossed lovers certainly moving around. Okay. That's what it shows, that they're moving around and in sync, according to police, with poor Gregory's dead body here. Okay. So let's break this all down. So there's some additional surveillance footage from, of all places, Lowe's Hardware. And according to police, it shows Christopher purchasing the tarp, zip ties, cement blocks that were found to secure Gregory Rice's body and cover him up. Police say that the cell phone data shows that Meagan and Christopher, okay, right, the two accused here, were spending time that day together, and that hours before Gregory went missing, the two lovers were at the shooting range practicing. Okay, that's fine. And then afterwards, they had dinner at a Mexican restaurant. So this is what police say their cell phone data is showing and what license plate trackers are showing about these two. So while, there's still a lot of gaps here. Even Christopher's testimony has gaps, which I'm suspicious of because I think he should be able to answer all the questions, and he hasn't. Okay, let's get down to some of the nitty-gritty of the timeline based on surveillance and digital evidence. At 10 p.m., Meagan's transport van is seen entering the complex where Gregory Rice lived. Gregory's phone shows that he's at home, right? That lines up with Christopher's testimony. But What is she doing there? Why is she there? So Christopher testified that he drove Meagan to Gregory's apartment because she said she needed to speak with him.
Right? I mean, what happens next?
What happens next? Exactly. So then depending on who you believe, she lured him out, and that he says, this is Christopher, the ex-lover, says that she just flings open the door and she opens fire, that she kills Gregory and then yells at Christopher to help get the body in the van. So I've got the quote here and I want to read it to you because these are his words. Okay, so this is Christopher describing to the jury what happened when they pulled up, right? And Meagan says, I just need to talk to him. And talking ends up in, allegedly killing him. Quote, I pulled up in front of him. It was like one swift move. She opened the door, flipped out, and was pop, 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 pop. I asked her, what happened? Why did you do that? She didn't say much. Really? Okay. She told me to go to the funeral home, and I just remember the complete nonchalance, like this was a minor inconvenience that we were going through. Something's missing here.
Something's missing here. I mean, she has him drive her to his house. And then he's shocked that she kills him immediately, that she kills him immediately. And I think this is hard to believe. I think this story is hard to believe. His role, though, and his continued, I was just kind of this innocent bystander to this entire relationship and to this murder. And then I was told what to do, and I just did what I was told constantly. And then he's going to testify next that he had just witnessed that he was scared of her because he'd just seen her shoot her ex-boyfriend. I mean, I find his testimony believable to the point that parts of the story are true, but I don't generally find all of it credible.
Mm-hmm. Again, something is missing here. So let's pick it up. So now we've got, according to his testimony, this is how Gregory was killed, where Gregory was killed. Now, according to his testimony, they put the body in the van, and they go and they take Gregory to the Myrtle Beach funeral home, and they put him in like one of those lockers, those, little compartments where you store bodies, supposedly, according to the testimony, until they could figure out what to do with him.
Right.
So
they have access to cold storage.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's going to question why they're there. In this way, their professions are incredibly convenient to these acts and his story. And I think as we get closer to motivation, there is something to the ease of these two in handling dead bodies that might change the way they view, perhaps, or the way she's even viewing it, if he's to be believed, the way they view murder or death.
Yes, it's like they've been desensitized to the exposure of a dead human body, where many of us would probably be freaking out. For them, it's just another day on the job to handle a dead body. It's very different, though, when it's someone you know, and then if you add the layer of the murder charges. Gosh, what a mess. Okay, let's get back to the digital forensic evidence, which for me, this is the heart of the case. Okay, so you've got poor Gregory in a locker, in a cold storage, while these two allegedly figure out what the heck to do. So, all right. You know how we said that Gregory's phone was on the move? We know that Gregory's phone was in the apartment at home when Meagan pulls up, according to what police say. Then here's and then remember how the testimony, Christopher says we took the body to the funeral parlor? Well, according to the cell phone data, you can see, according to police, that Gregory's phone is now moving from his home to the funeral parlor, right, and that it is in sync with Meagan's movements. So the poor man now is dead. His cell phone, though, is still quite alive and collecting data.
It's just such a mistake. I mean, in what they could have been thinking as to hiding evidence. I mean, that cell phone data is really corroborating every single thing that Christopher is testifying to factually. Again, his role, I think we're never going to know all of the intricacies, but as to a factual step by step, those moves are looking corroborated.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so we've got at 10 o'clock, to remind everyone, 10 p.m. is when Gregory's home and Meagan shows up. Okay, according to police, then the next timeline is 11 p.m. Okay, so now we believe that the body's been moved to the funeral home. At 11 p.m., Christopher's vehicle and Meagan's van, so two vehicles, are seen on security cameras at the Lowe's parking lot. Okay, according to police, the videos show that Christopher, is getting in and out of her van, and the cars move several times. So there's a lot going on. We don't know what's going on, but there's a lot going on. And then finally, both vehicles leave the parking lot for the absolute last time at 8:15 in the morning the next day. Okay. All right. What could have happened in between? Oh my goodness. When you are in the business of handling dead bodies at all hours of the day and night, it's possible you could run into a colleague at all hours of the night at the funeral parlor. That's exactly what happened. Okay. So there's an embalmer who's working the overnight shift at the funeral home. He testifies that at 12:45 a.m., he sees both Christopher and Meagan there at the funeral parlor. Okay, is that weird? No, remember, one's a deputy coroner and the other one transports bodies.
And nobody has any reason to really look in there to confirm that, even though there's a witness there, because of the routine business they're in.
Exactly. That's why I say this is one of the messiest murder cases that I've seen in a while. So license plate readers, according to police, they pick up Christopher, right, the boyfriend, driving his vehicle back, they say, from the area which they later found the body in the river. So it's not like the defense has said, look, you don't have video of this murder taking place. That is absolutely true. That has not been presented. But what we're seeing is this digital forensic, these little breadcrumbs all over the place that are like, well, okay, well, why is Christopher coming back from that area in the river one county over where poor Gregory's been found dead? A lot of logical questions, right?
Many logical questions for the jury to make peace with.
Mm-hmm. So I want to get back to the Lowe's, because something that happened at the Lowe's to me is just like, again, it's all in the details. So we know, based on what the police have said, that they found this security video, right? Which is of they say, Christopher buying the murder kit. It's how they found the video. So police go to the Lowe's security guard and they say to the security team, can you help me out? Can you look through the receipts at around this time? Because I know these people were here. This is what I'm looking for. So the security guard goes through the receipts, finds a very interesting shopping list. Again, the murder kit, tarp, cinder blocks, zip ties. Who's buying this late at night? And then they see the time on the receipt. And then they go to the video, they match it. And then police say, oh my gosh, look who that is. That looks just like Christopher. And it's the detail.
It's the detail.
Right. It's the breadcrumbs. It's how you figure it out. It's like the picture's becoming very, very clear.
I don't even know that we have crumbs anymore. I think we have a loaf here. And I wonder why she has elected to go to trial.
Okay, so here's a question for you, Rachel. Like, when I review this forensic evidence, for me, it looks more damning against Christopher because he's the one seen shopping and seen coming from the area, right? As opposed to her. And I know she's being called the mastermind here and the master manipulator. I'm just curious. Do you think the case is that strong against her?
I think the assessment was made by law enforcement and the prosecutors early on. I am sure they offered her similar deals. I would guess, again, we have no idea what was going on, but I can't imagine pleas were not discussed through this time. But I think the assessment was made that she was likely the more culpable of the two. And I think he has gotten off pretty lightly. I think he is only facing a total of a max of a potential 20 years, 15 for the conspiracy and 5 for the accessory. And I think that this is where they landed, and it's going to be hard for her to get out of these facts cleanly, to walk away from these charges.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Well, let's get back to when they discover the body. So on November 8th, Gregory's body is found in the river. And a few days later, Meagan and Christopher are arrested. What is very interesting about what we've now learned that was going on, family dynamics, there's the exposure of the affair and these anonymous text messages that Christopher's wife, Erica, was receiving. But there's also, as we said a little while ago, about the eldest daughter testifying against her own mother. So Savannah told the jury that they figured out, the kids figured out that Meagan mom was having an affair with Christopher because he came over one day and they were having loud sex upstairs while the daughter had her friends over. So, this to me, Rachel, again, is like, that's sloppy. Don't expose the children to this. But also, it goes to like, nobody is thinking here.
No, nobody's thinking here. This is, there's perhaps passion in this relationship that they can't control themselves, but this does not sound like a pair that is really thinking their actions through, even as it relates to just their basic home life and their children.
Mm-hmm. And so Savannah, who is the 19-year-old who testified, she said something that was really quite horrifying. This is before she knew her father was dead. She knew her father was missing, but she didn't know her father was dead. This is what she tells the jury. Apparently, her mother, Meagan, comes home drunk, according to Savannah's testimony, and Meagan is mad at the other daughter for misbehaving, and she tells the jury, my mother said, quote, I hope what happened to your dad happens to your sister. And so Savannah, the daughter, is like, Mom, what are you saying? What do you mean? Like, what do you know? It made her think like she knew something about what had happened to her dad. And again, I find this young woman to be very credible. It's very hard to watch her testify because she is so anxious and so nervous that she's physically trembling and catching her breath. And it's very disturbing to watch. But she is replaying the horror of her life. I think she's very credible. I think this young woman's credible.
She's collateral damage in so many horrible ways. And when we do these shows and we discuss these children left behind in these hideous acts, that is the heartbreaking moments of all of it. Of course, the victim and it's the victim's family. It's the victim's family. It's also the murderer's family. But I think that Meagan gave things away. She had tells. One of them being, well, let's change the schedule and go over to Dad's. She had tells. She wasn't good at this.
Mm-hmm. I give her daughter so much credit because the amount of strength that it has to take. Your father is dead, murdered, and you are having a hand in perhaps, at least in the attempt to convict your mother and put her away for the rest of her life, leaving you pretty much orphaned. So to have the strength to do that, and then if you are watching these videos, to see Meagan's face while her daughter is testifying, she is frowning and she is staring at her. And I'm like, she's one scary looking mom. I think most moms, if they heard their children say these things about them, would just break down into a puddle. Right.
This is not what most moms would do in many, many ways.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, it's, and the testimony and the allegations all do amount to her being, to her being perceived as pretty terrifying. And so it is brave for her daughter to come forward in this way.
And that's interesting, Rachel, because Christopher saying he's afraid of her. The daughter is clearly afraid of her just looking at her physically. So, yeah, I guess she is one scary lady here. Well, Meagan maintains her innocence. Trial is continuing. And Christopher, as you said, is facing up to 15 years for conspiracy, 5 years for the accessory charge. We'll see what happens to him. And if Meagan gets convicted, she could spend the rest of her life behind bars. It's a fascinating case, and it is a terribly sad case. Look, there's never, ever going to be a motive. There's no answer or explanation to taking someone's life. But this doesn't appear to be self-defense. This doesn't appear to be, a fear for your life. None of this makes sense. And it's just all of these families have been destroyed. And for what?
It is a horrible case, and we will see what happens. And my guess is that she will be convicted.
I think you're right. It is time for our comment section. These are the crime cases you all are talking about on social media. Here's our producer, Will Updike, who has his grandpa vest on today for those of you who are listening and not watching.
For those of you listening and or watching, we're in Southern California. It's very hot. Can't put on the full cardigan. So I just, get the vibe of it.
But hold on a second, because Rachel had to stop to turn on her air conditioning. You're wearing a vest. I'm wearing thick denim. There's like 3 serious microclimates going on here.
Yeah. It's very different all around Southern California. You never know what you could be getting. Just like you never know what you're going to get on this segment. Today, we have a case of rough skating for a radio host accused of drunk driving through a crime scene. This case comes out of Virginia Beach, Virginia, where officers were trying to contain the scene of a crime when a well-known but unwelcome bystander tried to enter. Allegedly, this all started with a situation where a suspect trying to allegedly break into a car wielded a replica gun at officers. So this led to an officer sort of involved shooting. Luckily, no one is mortally injured in that. The suspect is currently behind bars. However, this whole incident sort of unfolded near a local roller rink, and that led to a prolonged investigation. Obviously, when an officer discharges a firearm, there's a lot of stuff that has to go on. So they're forced to secure the scene, get things going on. So they have crime tape up, very clearly a serious situation here, when our unwanted guest allegedly enters the scene at around 9:30 a.m. So police officers say that 43-year-old Brandon Stokes attempted to drive through the crime scene as officers are, securing this area, surveilling everything. Naturally, they tell the driver, you got to get out of here. You can't come in here right now. But the man persists. So worth noting here that our suspect, Brandon Stokes, is also the owner of the roller skating rink property. So this might have been why he was allegedly so persistent to try and enter these premises, despite, pretty clear reason to not be able to go inside. So officers are continuing to tell Brandon, you can't cross through this crime scene. They say that he became belligerent. He's yelling at officers. He at one point allegedly says, "You want to bet?" in reference to him being able to enter this roller skating rink here. And so this is where troubles really start to mount for our pal Brandon as he continues this sort of back and forth with police. They realize that they recognize the voice. This guy is not only the owner of this roller skating rink property, but also a well-known and beloved radio personality. So we're dealing with a true Renaissance man here. Now, Brandon goes by the stage name of Shaggy, which makes sense given his haircut. Show a little mugshot for you there. He is part of Norfolk, Virginia's Z104 morning show, so he's a recognizable character already. But officers noticed that something is even more sort of distinctive about his voice this time around. They claim that his words are sort of incoherent and that he was, shouting and smelled of alcohol. So they asked Brandon if he's been drinking. It's unclear through the reports if he gave any sort of response to the officers there. But instead of sort of, him driving away and leaving officers to secure the scene, his alleged persistence in this matter takes them to look a little closer at Brandon. They get Brandon out of his vehicle, still unable to enter this roller skating rink, but they get him to take a breathalyzer test. And according to police, Brandon blew a BAC of 0.18, which is more than double the state's legal limit of 0.08. Again, this is around 9:30 a.m. in the morning. So armed with this info, police arrested Brandon and they charged him with DUI and obstruction of justice, I guess for trying to get into this scene or whatever. He was later booked into the county jail, but he has since bonded out. And according to reports, he has been sent back to the studio to return to the desk of his morning show there at Z104. Multiple outlets have reached out to Brandon for comment, but he has not responded yet, according to anything I could find online. But a high-profile personality trying to roll through his roller skating rink and getting jammed up is just the perfect type of fodder for this segment. It feels like. And I think we talk about this every week, but it seems like, if everything police has said here is allegedly true, there were sort of multiple attempts where maybe you could have taken a step back and sort of charted a different course. So
Shaggy, come on now. Right. There are a lot of times that Shaggy could have but maybe if the accuracy of the blood alcohol level testing shows that he was inebriated, then he's not making good decisions. Obviously, shouldn't be behind the wheel. But, the flip side to this, okay, so he's a personality. Well, now everybody's talking about Shaggy. So now everybody's listening to Shaggy because Shaggy.
Oh, you think so? You think that any promo is good promo?
Sometimes, right? It's a talker, right? It's a total talker because thank God in his alleged inebriated state, he didn't harm anyone, right?
Yes.
So he's acting badly, rudely, entitled, right? And everyone's talking about it. So yeah. I think Shaggy ends up, getting more listeners out of this.
I guess it depends on his exposure on the stuff charge here. I guess, Rachel, if what police say is true and that this BAC is allegedly so high, does that raise a valid defense for the obstruction of justice charge? If he's okay, maybe is there a path where maybe if he pleads to DUI, they would drop the obstruction thing? Or if it did go to court, he could be like, hey, I didn't mean to obstruct. I was, I was 3 sheets to the wind or whatever.
I think the obstruction charge is to just get the plea to the DUI and move forward because they would say, okay, well, we're going to have both at trial. So here's what you're facing. And that's a pretty high BAC. So he's got some explaining to do.
Oh, no. It is not looking good for Shaggy. We got some great comments on this one. Chuck A brought up the time of day this happened. They said, can you say all-nighter? Which, yeah, you got to wonder what's going on there at 9:30 a.m. if his BAC is as high as police allege. Citizens Matter is actually on the same page as Anna, thinking that, any promo is good promo. They said he should do 104 days. It'd be good promo. I guess they've got Z104 there in mind.
Oh, wow. Very clever.
I flashed this mugshot for our viewers, but for the listeners, he's 43 years old, kind of a long silver hair situation going on, ponytail, kind of looks. He goes by the nickname Shaggy. I feel like you can kind of get a picture there. But Lord of Catan said, I think the biggest crime is the ponytail, which I'll show another picture too of him getting arrested, and he's in handcuffs and police are putting him into the car, and yeah, you can see his ponytail and stuff going on. It wouldn't be my ideal situation to get arrested in, which, if you're in one of those scenarios, I think best case is you can get a good looking mugshot. I would hope. Bob the Clown said that's definitely a face for radio. Ouch.
Ooh, brutal.
Yeah. I want to end this one on a comment from Matma, who are suspects Scooby-Doo alter ego here. They said zoinks, which I was a big fan of the Scooby-Doo cartoons. So thinking of Shaggy getting into some trouble. I don't know that he and Scoob would ever be, belligerent at the rolling rink, but perhaps, if they were trying to get to some sandwiches or something, they would.
Or solving a case.
Yeah. Then they would maybe cross a crime scene. That's the only twist this one needs, is for someone to pull a mask off and it's not a ghost, but in fact the owner of, I guess the roller skating rink. But that will do it for this week's comment section. I want to thank everybody who sent those in. You can do that over on our YouTube community page. You can also comment in the comments on this video, on any of our videos. Anna does read your comments, correct?
I do, and I respond. And we had a new guest on last week, Don Tabak, the former homicide detective from LAPD, and he was a huge hit. Everybody calls him Gramps and referring to him as to the Saturday Night Live character. He's quite unfiltered. So, Don was a big hit.
Yeah, so you can check out that podcast and all our podcasts wherever you get your podcasts, obviously. But that is going to do it for me here in our comment section. So as always, until next week, don't do crime.
Rachel, thank you again. Always love to hear your perspective. Where can people follow you, find you? Because I know I'll be looking at commentary on a case and you'll pop up on television. So how do people follow you?
I'm at Law and Rachel on Instagram, and you can always find me on my law firm website, zfzlaw.com.
You can find me at Anna G News, Anna with one N. You can find everything we do here at True Crime News by following one simple handle, at My True Crime News. You can find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and you can get all our episodes. We have hundreds of episodes, actually. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we have a very strong and vocal community. Sign up to receive our newsletter at truecrimenews.com. So until next week, this is True Crime News, the podcast. I'm your host, Ana Garcia. Crime never stops, and neither do we.